Where did we come from? What happened to make us what we are? Where are we going, and how will we get there? How will we get there from here when there seems like an impossible distance to travel? Religion and science have at least one thing in common. They both seek to answer questions like these. Questions about our origin and our destiny. Over the past month or so, Dr. Sheldon Hurst has been offering a course based on the world's creation stories, looking at some of the great attempts that humans have made to answer questions like these. We have heard stories from all different civilizations and cultures throughout human history, including just this morning. Perhaps our most modern creation story, the one we have received from contemporary science. Well, Sheldon just read 3 creation stories for you. What's that? You didn't hear 3? You only heard 2? Well, maybe we need to look a little closer. But let's start at the beginning. 15 billion years ago, give or take, as Brian Swim and Thomas Berry write in their book Universe Story, shape-shifting matter appeared as primeval fire to transform into galaxies, and then to take on the form of molten planets, and then to shift again and again and again, creating all the billion living species of life on Earth, including that one most precious and problematic species, our very own. Most unimpressive at first, some new spark within our species exploded into a new form of consciousness. And consciousness that, as far as we know, the world had never seen. And so in our earliest ancestors, as Swim and Berry write, Earth became able to reflect upon itself. Millennia passed. Long, long time. For most of human history, we knew ourselves by the stories we told, orally at first around the campfire, or drawn in caves and rocks. But then we developed a new power, writing. And we began to write down and record and keep our stories. And that brings us to the second creation story we're considering today, the one that Sheldon read from Genesis 2. Now this one probably originated in some of those earlier oral stories passed down around campfires, but it was written down sometime between David and Solomon's reign and the Babylonian exile, some period of centuries there. I like to think of this story from Genesis as the indigenous Hebrew creation story. And I hope you enjoyed the new translation that you have in your bulletin today. It might look a little different than the one you're familiar with, and this one is by a Jewish scholar named Everett Fox. And I was wondering if you look at it again in your bulletins, is there anything that jumps out at you as different? Something you haven't noticed before? Not a rhetorical question. Great. Yes, exactly. That human/Adam, soil/Adam, Adama, that's actually the Adam, is how you pronounce it, and the Adamah, those are the Hebrew words in the Old Testament. And it shows you something that you might not have noticed in our English translation. Something that the writer, using this beautiful new language at their disposal to write down their stories, something that they knew, that maybe we forgot. Can anybody tell me what you might notice about this Hebrew connection, Adam and Adamah? Do they sound similar? They sound similar, a little more similar than humans and Earth, right? So there's a wonderful scholar of the Hebrew Bible named Phyllis Tribble. And she talks about the Hebrew text of this story. And she says what this story shows us is that in creating the world, God makes distinctions, but they are distinctions that result not in opposition, but in harmony. It's a pun. It's a pun that points out that Earth is the genesis of earthling, that we are humans from the humus. And Tribble also writes, notice that this earthling, and you'll know this if you read on, is sexually undifferentiated. Now that might come as a surprise because we think of Adam as a proper name, Adam. But that's not what this is. This isn't a proper name. This isn't a man's name. This simply means earthling. It's not until later in the story that this earthling becomes divided into male and female, which are different words altogether. Ish and Isha. So, as Tribble writes, to see the complete story of creation, you have to keep reading. It's in process. It's a tale that's still being told. And she writes that this Ha'adam, this earth creature, is not a self-made man, a patriarch, a superman, or an ubermensch. Only two ingredients constitute this new creation, this human being: dusty earth and divine breath. Notice that. Earth and breath, the breath of God. And both of these things are tenuous. We can return to dust. We can lose our breath, our divine breath. So Tribble describes the creation story that we get through Genesis as 2 and 3, that is, chapters 2 and 3, as a love story. But it's a love story gone awry. And you know the rest of the story without my even telling you, I am sure. The story of that separation into male and female, of the temptation by the serpent and its tragic results. You know that these humans couldn't stay in their lovely garden home, and you know why, at least sort of. It's confusing, isn't it? For reasons we don't fully understand, part of creation as we experience it leaves room for something the scientists call randomness, chaos, or that we know as freedom and even sin. For somehow God sets up the world in this story in such a way that there's room left for things to come wrong. And go wrong, they do. There's room in this story for the tragic. The poisonous fruit, the thorn and the rose, the curtain of death. So here we have it. Whether you look at the scientific story of evolution or the biblical story of Genesis, creaturely life is hemmed in joy of unknowing. So for the human being, it seems to be at least a love story gone awry. And that brings us to our third creation story. Because creation isn't finished, remember? Well, for the first time this year, I have to thank Sheldon because he has helped me see the transfiguration story from Matthew as another kind of creation story. Never occurred to me. Sheldon, it's an email exchange that we had as we were planning these two sermons that we did last week and this week. And if you didn't hear Sheldon preach last week, go watch the podcast. It was really good. And Sheldon has helped me see this mystical, mysterious story of Jesus' transfiguration on the mountaintop into this shining being within this broader story of continuing and evolving creation and of our own responsibility to creation. So, in an email conversation we had, and I hope you don't mind me quoting you, he wrote, imagine the creation of Adam and Eve next to the great affirmation of a spirit-filled life. Because as we've talked about, Adam means earth and Eve, Hawa, means life. Adam and Eve, earth and life. And then we have Jesus transfigured on the mountain as a new humanity. Humanity in its fullest expression as truly spirit-filled life. And then he wrote, that starts all kinds of things in my mind, all of it profoundly related to the creation ethic that is required of us. And metamorphosis, he said, the Greek word for transfiguration and the theme of Anka's art, which we have been viewing and using and relating to in the last month or two, which you can see in that chapel and which is on the cover of your bulletin. Anka's art is all about metamorphosis. Metamorphosis, another word for transfiguration, the actual original Greek word. And so let's look at this metamorphosis on the mountain with fresh eyes for a minute. Like Genesis, this story is hemmed in by a void on either side. You probably remember what comes before our story in Genesis 2, that wonderful passage in Genesis 1 that we heard last week, and the fall and the expulsion from the garden. But do you know what comes before and after the transfiguration story? I don't know if anybody would remember that. We so often think of this story in total isolation, like it just happened for no reason. What happened right before this story is Jesus predicted his death for the first time. You see, the his disciples thought they were following a superhero who was going to ride in on a white horse and liberate Israel from Rome, maybe by a sword if necessary, and be that great military Messiah, that king they had been waiting for. But Jesus says, no, I'm actually going to die in Jerusalem, on a different mountain, Golgotha. And as one scholar says, Lent, the season we're entering on Wednesday, is a story strung between two mountains, the Mount of Transfiguration and the Mount of the Cross. So you have that recognition, you have that prediction of Jesus' death right before almost a foreshadowing of his resurrection in this story. Maybe they needed a little hope, a vision of what was possible to hold on to for the journey ahead. of Transfiguration, they go down the mountain because, of course, Jesus says, no, we can't stay there forever. How many of you have wanted to hold on to those blissful, ecstatic moments which come so rarely in life? Maybe it was a wedding or a birth of a child or a glimpse of creation's glory. Who knows what for you was the mountaintop experience. But Jesus says, no, you can't hold on. Get up and don't be afraid, but we are going back down the mountain. When they come back down the mountain, they meet a boy. A boy who is literally being thrown around by what in their time they understood as a demon. And he was being thrown into the fire and thrown against rocks. And as he's thrown around by this demon, he's disfigured. He's disfigured. From transfiguration, we go into disfiguration. From perfect harmony, we go into disharmony because that's where we live, isn't it? And that's where Jesus leads us always back to help the disfigured ones, which of course is all of us. Well, as Sheldon pointed out today, we have medicine to heal diseases like epilepsy, as this was identified in the Bible. But who are the disfigured ones today? What is the disfigured one today? Maybe in part it is the very earth, the disfigured one who needs God's healing and our participation in that healing. So what does it say about us, the species in which earth comes to consciousness? Who are we? Well, maybe we're the ones who can't stay still. Maybe that's as good a description as any of the human race. We couldn't stay in Eden. We were too hungry for knowledge, too sneaky for innocence, and too daring for our own good. So we come out of that beautiful garden and into what becomes human civilization. And we couldn't stay on the Mount of Transfiguration either, because somehow creation can't ever stay still. It's always changing, always moving. And so creation always means metamorphosis, continuing creation and recreation in Christ. Well, I think the message, maybe the takeaway from this transfiguration story, is that even though, of course, the disciples wanted to stay up on that Mount of Transfiguration, they couldn't stay there because Jesus' work wasn't done, and neither was theirs. As long as one person, one creature, or earth community itself is disfigured by that love story gone awry, our destiny is not complete. For those of you who love Buddhism and know something of Buddhism, you might think of Jesus as that bodhisattva that we are also called to be, who can't rest until every last one is relieved from suffering. And so we're called down the mountain and back into the mud, but the promise holds that after the cross, we will know the dawn of resurrection. And we will all be shining, all transfigured. So Sheldon said to me, imagine an earth ethic based on metamorphosis, transfiguration. What kind of healing could we do if we come down the mountain filled with the responsibility of being transfigured ones? Being transfigured ones. Well, we humans are always both dust and divine breath, light and darkness all mixed together. It's our fate, but it's also our opportunity. We can't stay in the garden and we can't stay on the mountain, but in another sense, it's always in us. That mountain, that transfigured self, it's still there, even when we don't feel it. Our limited minds, we can only perceive one reality at a time. We can only sometimes see the beauty or the ugliness. But what if we can spend Lent keeping our eyes focused on the transfigured one, so that by directing our gaze there, we ourselves may participate in becoming more and more of that shining, transfigured being of light that we are called to be, to live out our vocation on this good earth. I want to close with a quote by Thomas Merton, the great contemporary modern mystic. He tells a story about an ordinary day that he had with an extraordinary vision. He wrote, "In Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people, that I was theirs and they were mine, that we could not be alien to one another, even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, of self-isolation in a special world." And he continues, "The sense of liberation from this illusion of difference was such a relief and such a joy that I almost laughed out loud. I have the immense joy of being a man, a member of a race in which God himself became incarnate. As if the sorrows and stupidities of the human condition could overwhelm me, now I realize what we all are. If only everybody could realize this, but it can't be explained. There's no way of telling people that they are all walking around shining like the sun." Could we spend this season learning to see one another shining like the sun?